Okay, hello to all our listeners out there in conspiracy land. Yes, this is the conspiracy panel, conspiracies and theories. I am your moderator for this session because I am clearly in black, and so yeah, Claudia is also in black. Dave is in gray.
Well, I have something that's very black underneath my grey.
Yes.
I'm clearly undercover.
Yeah,
and of course,
yes,
my black has
yes.
Right. Yeah.
Just to show off.
We are the secret people in black. We are the little men who aren't there, and we are here to talk about modern conspiracies. So, right. I suppose the first obvious question is the one we've all been talking about, which is there's a lot of conspiracy theories going on right now with QAnon and all these the pandemic, seemingly. Spawning conspiracy theory after conspiracy theory. Why now seems a little obvious, so let's explore why these conspiracies at this time.
Who wants to lead off? Okay, Claudia, after you.
Okay. Well, I think they have always been around, but they're gaining. I mean, some of it is coincidence. Or maybe a lot of it is coincidence, but in the last few years, it has become a lot easier to disseminate stuff, social media mainly. 20 years ago, that just wasn't possible in the same ways. So in Germany, we sometimes call these things Stammtischparolen or Stammtischgeplauder. So that's like when you meet in a bar at your regular table, that's where usually these things like, oh, there's a big thing going on top and the politicians are all in on it or whatever, that kind of talk, that I have the feeling that it used to be relegated to smaller groups and private circles. And now it's just sort of flooding everything. And then, of course, it's a crisis. And in a crisis, people are looking for anything that can explain the situation that is frightening and that is confusing. And if scientists and politicians and epidemiologists say we don't know yet, we're working on it, then for most people that's not good enough and they want an explanation. And so that's one big thing, I think.
Yeah. So looking at things perhaps in a slightly broader perspective, the world is a complicated and an increasingly complicated place. And our pattern recognition tools are evolved for a more simple environment, and it's also evolved for self-preservation. The best analogy I can think to this is visual processing. So if you see something out of the corner of your eye, you may think that it's something that's out to get you. Jump a bit, you turn around, actually it's your cat that's just jumped up onto the chair next to you. That's fine, no damage from that. Better to have a false positive than a false negative when what might be in the corner of your eye is a tiger that's about to eat you. That's perfectly sensible. But as the world gets more complex, the same pattern matching things can lock onto stuff that's not there. You can throw a random series of dots down, like constellations of stars in the sky. They're a random series of dots. And people join the dots and they come up with Orion, they come up with Telescopium, a famous Southern Hemisphere constellation. They have no meaning. They're not real out there. They're real in here. And when there is essentially random events happen, the emergence of this virus, something was going to happen. It's been predicted for a long time. I remember in the mid-90s reading The Coming Plague by Laurie Garrett, going through an awful lot of things. Ebola was the big scary one at the time, but it was clear that emerging diseases that come out because we're rubbing up against natural environments that we haven't rubbed up against before, that we're mixing diseases from different species together by keeping them in enclosed environments, in farms or markets or whatever. It was clear something was going to happen. And it just happens to have been this one. SARS and MERS came out, weren't capable of spreading as rapidly as SARS-CoV-2, but the writing was on the wall. So it shouldn't have been a surprise to anybody. The fact that certain countries were not prepared, it happens. One could go into an awful lot of politics about why that happened, but that's not what we're here for. But people tell stories about why that might have happened, about why the disease emerged now and not under a previous administration in the US, perhaps, about other things that are going on, and you can start the dots being joined together. You look, as we were discussing this earlier, what's the other big new thing that's in the news at the moment? 5G, it's everywhere. So that's another dot that goes into the pattern. And pretty soon, Bill Gates puts up lots of money to help produce vaccines. We've already had plenty of conspiracy theories about vaccines. So Bill Gates gets added to the stack of dots, and he's a computer person, mobile phones. That's a confirmation that this 5G stuff is going on, and the pattern builds. And at the same time, because it's essentially a random event, and there's lots of other random things like 5G happening at the moment, we don't fully know what's going on. And speaking as a scientist, I'm not connected to any of I'm not a biologist, but I know people who are. And you can't come up with instant answers, the kind of instant answers that journalists demand. And it's worthwhile noticing that in certain countries, including the UK at the moment, journalists are essentially running the country. Boris Johnson is a journalist. Michael Gove is a journalist.
Okay.
And they are used to producing stories for newspapers in their columns that neatly wrap things up, that come up with nice, easy sounding solutions, easy sounding explanations for things and people to blame for what's going on. And that's their way of handling things. It's their way of selling newspapers. And so all of this feeds together. And it's not an actual way to solve the problem. But we have to get away from these inclinations, and how we develop a toolkit to supersede the pattern recognition circuits and the need for a nice, simple narrative that we've evolved with is actually going to be a serious problem for the next centuries.
Yeah, as a scientist, I'm an anthropologist, and the fact is that a lot of our behavior is really, explained if you sort of take a step back and think that we are effectively hunting, gathering animals from a savanna lifestyle. We have a lot of cultural similarities with baboons, actually. It sounds, and it's not just pattern recognition. The thing is, it's pattern recognition has a lot of utility. It's not just the ability to spot the tiger, in the a second before it pounces, but also the ability to look down at the grass and make of that sort of random visual input. Be the one that spots the seeds and the nuts in the tall grass.
Yeah.
But also the final thing really being social cohesion, being able to spot a pattern and tell a story, it brings us together. And, it's can be a positive thing, the story of how the world came to be or why things are, or, the comforting thing, the idea that events are not random, but that there is, the corollary for, Bill Gates is, an evil overlord killing us all through his vaccines, is that there's a benign power,
Yes.
out there. And I find it, it's interesting that in the QAnon, it's Trump, because Trump's utterances are so completely random, that you can sort of see how people start to develop, the kind of sunk cost fallacy with him. They voted for him because, some people vote for him because they voted for him the first time, presumably because they're racists and idiots. Some people presumably because they thought, more benignly, because they thought, well, the political establishment is sclerotic, and here is this bombshell that we can throw into it. And then when you start getting all these strange, random, sound and fury signifying nothing, well, I can't have voted for somebody who just kind of sits there and randomly utters phrases on Twitter like a bot. There has to be a logic behind it. Otherwise, why did I vote for him? I'm not stupid. And so you start infecting this random noise with more and more sound. Have either of you seen the article that's been circulating on the internet about QAnon from the point of view of a game designer?
Oh, no.
Yes, I'm not sure that what I saw was what's being posted on the Discord, but yes, I have seen that. And Charlie Stross has some very interesting perspective on this, because one of his novels, I think it was Halting State, essentially has an online augmented reality game subverted for espionage, political type purposes. There's a number of other books that do the same thing. There's one, I can't remember what the first novel was. There's the volume 2 in the series is called Deep State by Walter John Williams. Actually has somebody using an ARG for good purposes rather than nefarious ones, but still it's not what the ARG is there for. So someone comes along and picks up a package from place A and delivers it to place B, scores 100 points in the game, but also gives somebody some medicine they might need or whatever. Okay. But yes, and I think the comment was that some of the elements of QAnon function a bit like that.
The games theory article is a bit more than that. It talks about how it kind of follows game mechanics, like, giving a scenario and then kind of dropping clues in certain ways. I don't follow this, personally, but, one cannot escape what it is in the news. And apparently the way Q works is by dropping breadcrumbs, as it were, like, sort of saying, secret message on the news tonight, and watch for the devil horns or things like that.
Sounds like the satanic panic of the 80s. Like, you have to play the record the other way around, and then you will hear the message, and everyone's like straining their ears and so on. But yeah, I find the most absurd aspect of that. So first you notice this was getting bigger and bigger in the US, and then suddenly you have a few, like, let's say, minor celebrities or wannabe celebrities in other countries who seem to be the big spreaders, the super spreaders of this. They suddenly take over bits or just sound bites sort of from the QAnon, and it totally doesn't make any sense. If they have someone posts screenshots of their Telegram channels on Twitter, and it's like total gibberish. You just see that all the keywords, the 5G and Gates and vaccine and Jews, of course, Jews always have to be in there in every conspiracy theory, but the connections they make, obviously they make sense to them, but if you're not in on it, you can't make any sense. But I find it so interesting that first these people were criticizing, like in Germany, the German government, and suddenly they just take over talking points from a totally different situation and simply put them over ours, and nobody says, well, this doesn't make sense because it's from somewhere else. So it just doesn't matter. You just sort of jump into the game, so to speak. And and take part, even if you don't understand where it comes from.
I think one of the important things about the gamification, as it were, of Q is that if you discover something, it's much more convincing.
Yes.
Even though it's something that you essentially have been handed to with a series of breadcrumbs, which leads to a dinner plate which has this thing on it.
Yeah.
You think, oh, I've found this out. I've got one over. I peeled back a layer of the onion of the conspiracy.
But again, yeah, but that's evolutionary as well. Again, you know, we get dopamine hits from finding stuff, even bigger dopamine hits if it's a complicated thing that we're finding, you know.
Yeah. And so thinking about how one can, what's the toolbox for fighting against this? And there are some interesting things out there. One of the things that's been mentioned on the Discord is the Spurious Correlations website, which sadly is down at the moment.
Oh, there's a conspiracy behind that, I think.
Someone shut them down, yes.
Yeah, they know too much.
So essentially what this website has got is just scads and scads of random data. So the number of shoes sold in Italy per year, and other things like the population of migratory butterflies in North America per year, and things like that. And you can press a button and it'll actually calculate correlations between random shit that's got no relationship to each other whatsoever. But because it's random shit, if you have enough data, you will get a random correlation that looks really good. And you'll look at that and think, my goodness, maybe those Italians are making their shoes out of butterflies that are being killed in America and shipped secretly to Italy to make shoes.
Something in the manufacture of the shoes is killing the butterflies.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's also possible. Yeah.
But
suddenly we've got at least two different conspiracy theories emerging from this same set of completely spurious correlations. And you need one of the toolboxes that you need to be able to fight against this is, well, first of all, the basic knowledge that correlation does not imply causation. And the number of times that this gets raised on various websites or whatever, and people say, "Look at this, it must mean something." Is a lot, but it's become a cliche, and people ignore it because it's become a cliche. But it doesn't mean it isn't right. But the other thing is a little bit more subtle, and actually knowing that if you've got 20 random correlations that are just made out from nowhere, then one of those will be significant at greater than 95% probability, just because 1 out of 20, that's 95%. It will happen at random.
But you can weaponize that in the other direction, though. I mean, remember how cigarette companies spent quite a long time arguing that the cigarettes didn't cause cancer, despite the overwhelming, by saying correlation isn't causation, and maybe these people are getting cancer from something else.
Or they're smoking a lot because they've got cancer, and it alleviates their symptoms.
The humorist Pierre Burton wrote an article in the 60s called "Does Cancer Cause Smoking?"
Exactly. But I think one big problem is you have a lot of fact-checking sites and tools now, because people have realized that there is a problem, and you need to counter all the false information and so on. And you have podcasts, and you have whatever, Snopes, and you know. But I think you can only reach people who are ready to question their ideas, and that are not that many people, or it's not enough anymore. And so the other, I mean, if that doesn't work, or it doesn't work on most people, or on also, the other question is, how do you then create better narratives? Because if that's the thing, if you can only reach people with stories, or certain people at least, then how do you create stories that are not simply lies, just, so we make up a different lie in order to get you to our side or something like that? What kinds of stories do we need to tell in order, I don't know, like get people to take climate change seriously finally, or something like that,
One of the things that's really interesting me about QAnon at the moment is the fact that Q's gone quiet. This is really interesting to me because, I mean, history shows that the conspiracies that survive are the ones that adapt. The wave of rapture cults in the 19th century, there's about like one that survived, and that's the one that didn't pin itself down to a specific date or timeline or set of events. And this strikes me as interesting that it's gone quiet, first of all, because it seems to me that the Q narrative could adapt quite easily to recent events, and yet it hasn't. But secondly, I'm wondering whether this means that it's going to do like the Millerite sect in the 19th century and kind of fade into oblivion, or whether the narrative is going to get picked up by somebody or something else, or sort of organically mutate. And the question is then, organically mutate into what and how? And, is it possible to direct this narrative drive from, a sort of an updated Protocols of the Elders of Zion into perhaps something that might be a bit more supportive towards slightly less, species suicidal things, like maybe green revolutions or something like that.
But there's I see a problem there, especially again currently in Germany, that the corona skeptics, the neo-Nazis, the esoteric people, the anthroposophy followers, people like that, are all sort of marching together. So I see it's a dangerous line of saying sort of, can we subsume certain things and maybe turn them in a different direction, or will we all end up, branded? Like at the moment, the big thing is like, okay, you have to see that you're marching with Nazis. You cannot pretend to be, peace-loving, rainbow flag waving person, and next to you there's the person with the swastika and so on. So that has been the newest development.
And we're starting to do this, but I think what we need to do is understand the process of radicalization more, and particularly the process of self-radicalization. I mean, ironically, this started with people looking at, militant Islamism, but, people are now applying that more towards other things and noting this isn't just some kind of religious fanatic trend, but notice the process by which, ordinary, even as you said, rainbow flag waving people can kind of find themselves. I mean, if you tell them like, you will be marching with Nazis in a little while, they wouldn't believe you. But then you start sort of, it's by incremental processes. I see that here.
And we see it happening. The last few demonstrations that were just against wearing masks, basically, you had really strange alliances. Or trans-exclusive radical feminists,
because they're feminists and they're left-wing and they're, gender positive and gender inclusive, but, they just kind of can't get their head around, they start believing bit by bit, they start believing stories about transgender people being out to kind of subvert the feminist movement, or and the next thing you know, they're taking money from American right-wing think tanks that that think Gilead is a something to aspire to rather than avoid.
The other interesting thing is that certainly we see in the UK is old conspiracy theorists coming back. So you're absolutely right. So the same thing that's happened in Germany with the for want of a better term, the anti-mask movement glomming onto Alternative for Deutschland and right-wingers. We've got the same thing here with anti-maskers and Brexit supporters But one of the most fascinating things that's happened on this is that David Icke, who thinks that the world is run by a secret cabal of alien reptiles who are in human skin suits, including the Queen of England and lots of other people. He's out on the stage at these events. It's almost as if there's, well, one of the key things to ask about any conspiracy theory that's being promulgated is cui bono, who benefits? And clearly, David Icke thinks he's going to benefit personally from glomming onto this and getting a little bit more oxygen of publicity, maybe selling a few more turquoise sweatshirts or whatever the color of those things was. Even Uri Geller is out there. My God, that's a name from the past.
We just had a comment that I find very important. I think it's more about building on shared mythos, not logic. This has been happening on the right since the 90s or earlier, arguing logic across belief or mythos is not working. We need an alternative mythos. But us on the left are not good at that. That's exactly sort of what I'm worrying about and what I keep reading. Like one of the threads I linked was by N.K. Jemisin and was precisely about that. We need a different story or different type of storytelling. But if you want to tell the truth, it's harder. You cannot give the simple story.
I think there's a very important lesson to learn, which came out in another. I don't know if it's N.K. Jemisin's thread, but one of the other, possibly the other thread that you linked to. And that is a willingness to admit ignorance and a willingness to say, we don't know, and accept it. Now, as a physicist, I've had to get used to that because, Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, you can't measure the position and momentum of a particle to infinite precision at the same time. So you can say where something is, but you can't say how fast it's moving. And this is a fundamental aspect of the universe. You can't do this. And okay, maybe this is just another story that's good to tell, but it's a story that you can fold out and be prepared to say, yeah, I don't know. So are there bugs in the cloud decks of Venus? Back to my talk yesterday. Yes. I don't know. Yeah. We don't know. We can't know now. There's possibly some indications, but we don't know. And if somebody strap me to a torture chamber and say, is it this? Is it that? Tell me the truth. I cannot, because I don't know. And we reward politicians and business people and leaders for knowledge, for saying, this is true. This is the right thing to do. We need to stop doing that.
Or for performativity. I mean, I don't know if one of the best threads I've seen actually about what happened to Jeremy Corbyn was by Lawrence Miles. And one of the things he pointed out was that he started off by saying we all want a rational, logical, reasonable leader, but the problem is we don't really. He said because as soon as the accusations of anti-Semitism started flying, he said Corbyn's response was just basically to sort of laugh and basically say, well, look at my track record. There's obviously no truth in it. Let's just, let's ignore this. And he said, whereas, Tony Blair would have been on the steps of a synagogue with his arms around a rabbi within 5 minutes. And this is the problem that, he assumed that people would trust to logic and reason and didn't trust the fact that people will also respond to emotivity and have a crass display. So as Henry's comment, the mythology, the mythos building, if you can. And I tell you, my science is softer than yours, but still, you get in situations where journalists will say, so this, and you say, well, actually, it's more complicated than that. And, you then sort of get well, we don't like that because that doesn't make for a nice soundbite on Radio
And
4.
then we're back to people looking for simple solutions, simple comments, simple statements, when the world is actually a lot more complicated than that and a lot more uncertain.
Yeah, I mean, the BBC have got me on their virtual Rolodex as somebody to potentially haul in anytime gender in business is a thing. And a number of times, as they say, reporter will say to you, so would women run a company better than men? And, obviously expecting, why, yes. Well, unfortunately, the answer is no, women are human, and they're
companies better than other people.
Yeah. And also put aside gender, running a company attracts a certain sort of person with a certain sort of set of abilities and a certain sort of personality flaws, and you've got to take that into account before you start looking at gender and, trends of how female CEOs behave versus male CEOs. But again, it's awfully hard to get that into the 5 minutes they're allotting the item on Newsnight.
Yeah. And I think politics is the same. I mean, if we're always complaining about the politicians, it takes certain character to get there, to go through the ranks and to rise through the ranks. So it would be very hard to find let's say the just good person up there on the top. It's hard to get there if you're good, I guess. I mean, if you're behaving good, you know what I mean.
So another interesting question about conspiracy theories is, yes, you can build a wonderfully detailed story about how space lizards are seeding virus spreading radio waves from 5G masts, etc., etc. But any story like that has to be tested, and this perhaps is another part of the toolkit for immunizing people against conspiracy theories. So yeah, okay. I'm imagining talking to a 5G conspiracy theorist at the moment. I don't know any of them, and I really don't want to. But let's just imagine this. And okay, so it's all 5G masts that are doing this, isn't it? Yeah. Okay. So if that was the case, then the parts of the country where there are no 5G masts shouldn't have any virus.
Yep.
Well, we've got plenty of COVID in Birmingham at the moment, but we don't actually have any 5G masts. But that doesn't stop people burning down 4G masts. So actually, I'm not saying this is a scientific method, but teaching people to test their hypotheses, to be skeptical internally. So if you follow the breadcrumbs, the Q breadcrumbs to some particular thing, and it says something, and this perhaps is a way that narrative can help, because you can look at this thing that you've found, discovered as led to by Q, but then you need to start thinking, well, what are the consequences of that? And if these consequences, then this is going to happen, and test that against reality. So the guy who turned up at that pizza restaurant with an automatic weapon, I think they were going to try and free the children in the basement who are going to be sent off to some horrifying thing. Did he get into the basement?
There was no basement.
There was no basement.
No basement. Yeah.
So,
yeah, that should be the ultimate test. Yeah. But in the process, people could have been hurt already. That's
absolutely. So what you just sneak around without an automatic weapon, looking for a basement and find one.
There's also Caroline Milan in the comments. Logic and reason is hard to sustain when the facts change constantly, not a sound foundation in the macrocosm. But that thought brings me to something else in there, which is also that there's less incentive to go down these rabbit holes when people are comfortable, when they're secure, when they're fed, when they're taken care of. because what you talk about lizard people makes me think about V. And I first saw V in the 80s when it scared the bejesus out of me because it was, I was 5 and people's heads were popping open. But, I saw when I saw it again, it was around about the mid 2000s, watching it at uni in the, and the thing was that everybody was laughing and talking about how unbelievable it was because, what the lizard people and those do is they start basically using scientists as somebody to blame, scientists. They're all liars. They're all evil. We will put them all in concentration camps. And everybody's saying, that's so stupid and unbelievable. Nobody would really believe that scientists are, liars. Nobody would really put scientists. And then not 10 years later, it's happening, but, the fact that we thought it was so impossible in the 2000s, because we were comfortable, we were fed, we were taken care of, the things were relatively stable, I'd say 2000, 9/11 had not happened. Everybody was feeling pretty secure in and of themselves. So, hate to say it, but, robust economy, people feeling reasonably happy and secure and fed and housed and taken care of, not that people won't conspire, but they won't be, asking, because people still believe in conspiracies then, but maybe, they won't take root as powerfully.
Yeah. And I just a sidebar on that. When I watched V originally in the 1980s, it was a wonderful antidote to the 1980 Olympics because one channel in the UK had the monopoly on the Olympics, so the other channel was showing V.
Mm.
So that was really good. I actually found it entirely plausible that people would blame scientists for whatever. Because, at some level, scientists are the modern equivalent of the witchy woman in the village. We know things, and we must be doing bad things with that knowledge because bad things are happening. And so you.
And the words make, one of some more interesting things in terms of talking of debunking and science and so forth is these natural food type people who go on about, I don't want to eat anything I can't pronounce, and pointing out that the words they can't pronounce are just, stuff, this is an apple, you would eat an apple, and yet, an apple contains all these words you can pronounce.
Yeah, there's
food free of chemicals.
There's a meme where it says all the bad things that are in, I think, veggie burgers or so, and then it lists different things. And if you sort of, if you Google what this actually means, one of it is like, I don't know.
Oh,
it's just minerals. They list minerals and but they just use terms to make it sound like, I don't know, or I don't know. I can't pull it up right now, but yeah, I think that's another way. The way you frame it may change the perspective of the recipient. If you frame it in a way that, oh, this could be dangerous, then suddenly everybody sees dangers. And if
and alternatively, if people start attributing, because I do a fair bit of work in the Far East, you see people who will say, so Western people who don't trust Western medicine, but will glom onto Chinese traditional medicine and not realize that the fact is that Chinese traditional medicine is basically the same principles as Western medicine. But because the Chinese words in translation sound more magical, it's not different. It's like, 5-herb miracle powder, now, sort of the Latin word in English may well mean 5-herb miracle powder, but, people will say, oh, it works better than Western medicine. It's got this inherent Eastern knowledge. It's like, no, it's actually the same thing of people taking things in nature and testing to see what cures, what alleviates the pain and what doesn't, so with a woo fringe on either side. But, sometimes saying that something is particularly magical and wonderful is, it's the benign conspiracy theory,
can I suggest we take a few minutes to, as we draw towards the end of our 50 minutes, to talk about conspiracies that do work, the conspiracies that are at some level out there, because we've already alluded to some of them. We've alluded to the tobacco industry, trying to cover up the damage that smoking does to lungs and to causing cancer. We've spoken about climate change. And it's now clear that a lot of the oil companies knew that there was a problem with this and have done their best to cover it up and suppress this knowledge. And the common factor in an awful lot of these actual conspiracies is cover up. Watergate is another very good example. And the reason why those sorts of conspiracies work, whereas your secret masters of the world conspiracies generally don't happen. We have no evidence for any of that. But of course, if they were in charge, they'd make sure that it wasn't. But yeah, moving swiftly on. But with cover-ups, everybody who's part of the conspiracy has something to lose, which is a strong motivating factor. So just hypothetically, I am not suggesting that this is a true conspiracy theory or not. Assassination of JFK. Now, there's so many conspiracy theories about Lee Harvey Oswald and all of that. There were certainly some strange things going on, more likely to be cock up than conspiracy, which is something that that's a phrase everybody needs to know. But let's just say that if one of the Secret Service guys, after the first shot, getting onto the back of the president's car, negligently discharged their firearm into the back of his head, then suddenly you have all the ingredients for a successful conspiracy.
Well, I'm glad you brought up Kennedy specifically, actually, because literally 3 years back, actually, it was 2017. I was in Dallas, and there's literally nothing to do in Dallas when the conference you're attending is over. Bar
been there as well. Absolutely.
But the great thing about the Sixth Floor Museum is actually how it shows how a series of cock-ups and attempts to cover the cock-up, and just the fact that President had never been assassinated outside of Washington, D.C. before, made space for the conspiracy, negligent firearm, but also the fact that at that point, because it was in Dallas, it fell under the jurisdiction of the county coroner, who was really not in a position to handle a situation like that. And so, the surgeons tried to, why couldn't they find the bullet? Well, because the surgeons were desperately performing an emergency tracheotomy trying to save the guy.
Yeah.
And
my visit, I didn't actually get to the museum.
Yeah.
I think it closed the day I had a chance to wander around Dallas. But just looking at the geography of Dealey Plaza, the window that Lee Harvey Oswald shot out of was a perfect sniper's nest for somebody going in a car down that way. It was a straight shot. The car was directly in front of him. The grassy knoll, which is actually a highway off-ramp, is just the worst place. The car's traveling transverse. You just have to look at the geography of the place to think, Lee Harvey Oswald had been trained as a Marine to shoot. He picked the right spot. He did the right thing. And, right thing to achieve.
Yes.
And just seeing the geography of the place killed any sense that I ever had that there might have been something more complicated going on around the actual assassination. There's lots of popping up afterwards.
There's a guy who's done computer modeling. He's basically taken all the footage, all the geography, puts it in. But because it's a computer model, he can then edit out the things that are distracting. So he edits out the crowds on either side. He edits out the Secret Service agents, edits out everything except Lee Harvey Oswald's presumed shot, the governor, and JFK.
Yeah.
And if you look at
The
Cover up, cover up.
wants to make sure that this news does not get out.
yes, I could well believe Aisha is involved in the assassination of JFK. I'm pretty sure my final words are going to be "clever girl." But anyway, yeah, you can just see, without part of the problem is just all the distracting visual and audio input that's going on everywhere else with Jackie in her pink dress and the Secret Service agents rushing hither and yon and the crowd panicking, but, just seen as it just, and you wonder why anybody thought there was a conspiracy.
Yeah. Absolutely. The other thing that has popped up in the comments, which might be worthwhile mentioning very briefly, are when there really is something secret going on.
Yeah,
you present something that's even more attractive as a sort of look over here, don't look here, look over there. It's the blimp. It's aliens crash landing in Area 51.
Yeah, but Area 51 is just so beautiful, actually, in a way. I take my hat off to them the way they handled it, because, they just, somebody said, I think I've seen a UFO, and they said, right, we're not confirming or denying, but monitor. And so just basically spun this web which has got to the point where now that, the Official Secrets Act has expired and they can say, guys, it really was experimental planes all along.
No, we don't believe you. That's just a cover up.
Yeah.
But
various comments have been going through. Do we want to actually ask for specific questions that we can read out, or I'm not sure how this has been working on other panels?
Well, we've got maybe between 3 and 7 minutes, depending on how much we stretch the definition.
I just think it's far more believable that most of the things are actually incompetence and then cover-ups. That seems much more believable to me as a person trying to be rational, because you see how many things go wrong in your own daily life and everywhere around you, and so the higher up, or the bigger the thing, the worse the consequences. So the bigger the cover up, and voila, you have something that makes people go, maybe there's something else behind there.
One of the biggest
this also feeds into our wish that somebody knows what's going on, that somebody's in control. And if there is something goes wrong, then it's comforting to believe that there is a reason for it. There's a standard thing that people will say when anything bad goes wrong is, I think everything happens for a reason. It doesn't, I'm afraid. Shit happens.
And I guess we maybe as a whole, as humanity, we were or are better able to deal with that if we are religious. And since fewer people
in control,
and maybe that's also a reason why these conspiracy theories and other things flourish, because fewer and fewer people are religious, or even if they are, it's more performative than anything else. I think maybe it just fills the vacuum because we need something, and if it's not believed.
Sorry, Fiona, go ahead.
One interesting fact of structuralist anthropology is, we've identified a handful of human universals, and one of them is religion. Individual people may not be religious, but all human societies have got religion, however formal or informal. And my cousin, the priest, and I have arguments about whether he thinks this means that God exists, therefore, and we're just there to receive him in whatever form. And I argue that this means that our brains are hardwired to see God in cloud shapes, and so. But whatever you believe, it is a point that if formal religion is failing, then the cults, the grassroots, and the superstition kind of step in to fill the void.
Well, I was going to say that religion can be a Trojan horse for some of these things. That's certainly been the case historically speaking. So look at the witch frenzy.
Yeah.
It's a very good example of that.
Yeah.
And interestingly, a lot of that wasn't about witches, but about heresy.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, which is even closer to the bone as far as religion's concerned.
And so again, even in those sorts of structured belief systems, which have got some external, well, God, for want of a better term, you still need to have skepticism and testing hypotheses, and not just diving straight into any particular scare story that comes along. Of course, if the scare story has already got rolling fast enough, if you are going to be skeptical, if you are going to sort of test the hypothesis, that means you've probably going to get burnt at the stake as well.
Yeah.
So there is a self-preservation here, which is another interesting aspect to those sorts of things. That it, at least in short term and on small scale things, it's better to be one of the people with the pitchforks, getting poked with a pitchfork.
Yeah.
This is true.
Sad.
Yes, indeed.
But yeah, talking about going back to the covering up institutional cock-ups, one of the biggest positive ironic examples of cognitive dissonance in public life I've seen is that at the height of the 9/11 conspiracy theories was the time that sex scandal broke in the CIA, where it turned out that the head of the CIA's mistress was passing on information to, and I was saying, how can people believe that these people can cover anything up?
Yeah.
They cannot even cover up their own boss's sex or misdemeanors. How could they cover up something that big?
Yeah.
But that was him taking one for the team.
Yeah. So
to demonstrate that there couldn't be a conspiracy by.
Yes.
I'm
clearly you've got the mindset. Yes, clearly you figured it out.
Yeah. Well, we're in right ahead.
Yeah.
That's one of the things you do, is to take random events and apply some narrativium to them. Come up with a story that either explains them or complexifies them in an interesting way. But maybe the proper way of inoculating people against conspiracy theories like this is to get them to make their own up. I have found that some of the most grounded people in reality are people who play a lot of role-playing games. Because
they're used to the game mechanics. Yeah.
They're used to game mechanics. They're used to making stories up. They're used to knowing that D&D isn't a great satanic plot.
Yes.
So maybe the solution to all this is to teach more people more science, more statistics, and get them all to play role-playing games.
Yes, and feed them and take care of them. Yes.
And make sure that they are safe and happy
and healthy. Yes.
Healthy. Yes.
Yep.
Everyone.
I think we can agree on that.
Now we just need a conspiracy to make sure that happens.
Yeah.
We're working on it.
Let's work on it.
Send me some secret smoke signals and I'll join in.
Okay. So see you all back in the Discord, I guess.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I'll be on
the Discord and happy to take your theories.
Yep. I'll be back after I've had some lunch.